Well, I'll be reviewing this show on high painkillers. Let's see how this goes. Okay, so in the last 48 hours, I have had 2 surgeries, which is why I'm having to do eye drops right now, because LASIK. But I want you to name one other content creator who will go through 2 surgeries and still come around to releasing a review of the 5th episode of The Wheel of Time the day after it drops. Nobody, motherfucker! But before we get into this episode, I want to address my review of episode 4, because I don't personally love it. I feel like I went a little too harsh due to the number of people who are saying Daniel's going easy on it because he loves the Wheel of Time so much. And what I realize I need to say, instead of going overly critical on small details I shouldn't have focused on so much, yeah, I'm predisposed to like the Wheel of Time.
I'm shocked.
It's my favorite story ever. And I don't think it's on me necessarily to try and change my perspective I'm coming from, but instead on the audience to know, hey, when you're watching my reviews, you're watching someone who's coming from the perspective of being a mega fan, which may mean I'm harsh on some things I think are undeserved changes, but I am naturally predisposed to really like a lot of the core elements of this story. And that's just how it's going to be from now on. I hope you guys can understand that, and let's go ahead and jump into episode 5. I'm going to draw some connections to my real life with some of the things covered here, and just please bear in mind that these are sensitive topics for me. But I'll keep those plot lines to be the last ones we cover, and let's go ahead and kick it off with Perrin and Egwene. This actually started off with me getting a bit of a laugh, and that's Perrin making one of the worst arguments you can make against a pacifist, which is like, isn't it hypocritical for you to be a pacifist and your animal to be killing stuff? No, jackass. I'm not my animal. Like, Perrin, come on. But I believe that's directly lifted out of the book, and it struck me the same way there. But we have a conflict where they're traveling with the Tinkers, and the Tinkers run into Valda and his White Cloaks. And I was so worried there was gonna be this corny moment, because the Tinkers start linking arms and being like, you can't take Perrin and Egwene, because Valda recognizes them and he's like, I want those 2. And they're like, no, no, no. Link arm, brethren. We will stop them. And I was like, oh no, this is gonna be so corny if it stops. Nope. The White Cloaks just start slapping. Perrin and Egwene try and run off, but they are quickly caught. That would have been such a bad moment if that linking arms had somehow worked, seeing how, like, horrible Valda is already with that one cold open, but nope. It went exactly as it should, and they were slapped around. And here we see Egwene, like, roughly brushed down and stripped by these White Cloaks, and it just struck me as so wrong. Like, I did not like that. Obviously, like, in the context of the show, it does a great job making the White Cloaks, obviously, on their power trip, we're gonna cleanse others BS, but, like, watching it, I was viscerally uncomfortable watching this rough brush be dragged down her body. It's just a way to make you hate someone. If you're ever forcibly brushing someone, please stop. But this was, like, clearly the White Cloaks' mock way of, like, making someone pure, someone, like, dirty traveling on the road. They have to clean them before they can have a meeting with Valda. Just, you suck. But then once again, we have Valda doing a interrogation tactic you often see in movies and stuff, where he's having a meal while Egwene is tied to a chair and Perrin is brought in. Then he makes this ultimate threat where he's like, look, I know you can channel, but if you don't prove it to me that you can, I'm going to kill him. If you do, I'll kill you, but, you know, it's up to you two. I'll leave. Bye. But there was one thing in this scene that did bother me. Previously, when White Cloaks were questioning Moiraine in episode 2, I believe, we had them not asking her directly, hey, are you an Aes Sedai? And I chalked that up for a reason that's in the books. The White Cloaks don't believe the 3 oaths are real, so they just think Moiraine would lie about it. I even made a TikTok about it, because it's something canonically in the books. The White Cloaks do not believe in the 3 oaths. But here, Valda says something as if he does, because he says you can't lie, and then when Egwene directly tells him, hey, I'm not an Aes Sedai, he goes, oh, okay, you are not an Aes Sedai. So maybe he believes it, but others don't. Maybe someone who has a better memory on Valda as a character can fill me in on this, but I was a bit confused on why he then wouldn't ask Moiraine that. Well, probably because she would then have an excuse to murder them all if he tried to take them prisoner, but it was just odd for me. Granted, she couldn't murder them all because of the 3 oaths, but she could definitely beat the crap out of them. And I love seeing how much the writers are utilizing the White Cloaks' own philosophies to justify their awful deeds. Like, Egwene says, I'm nobody, and he's like, everybody's somebody under the light, which is just one of those things you can say to undercut and gaslight and misdirect what people are actually meaning and saying to get what you want. Classic textbook manipulation, and I'm gonna say it again, I fucking hate this guy. But we have a really fun element of channeling brought forward and talked about here, where Valda actually apparently is quite knowledgeable in weaving, which someone in his position I imagine would try to do. And he brings up the fact that a lot of Aes Sedai do some hand gestures to improve or direct their weaves, but it's not needed. And if he's been interrogating dozens of women who can channel, it makes sense that he might actually start gathering little tiddly-tiny bits of this type of knowledge. But this is a true thing in the books. You actually can sit completely still, but there's some people who have a crutch, so to speak, or because they learned by moving their arms, they continually need to do this, and if you tie them down, they will be severely affected with their channeling. I'm fading fast, but stick with me here. That also implies that Egwene might be over this crutch, because with channeling, often if you get over some kind of block or crutch just once, it's gone forever, and here we do see her end up channeling well seated and restrained, so possibly she'll have an advantage over other Aes Sedai with this. Neat. That explains how he's been able to do some of the capturing he's done of Aes Sedai. Also, just some Aes Sedai are very weak and it could have overwhelmed them. And of course, there's knocking them out, which we'll talk about knocking people out when we cover another plot line. Also, throughout this story with Egwene and Perrin, we keep hearing wolves in the background, and I just like hearing them slowly build as something I can't get into for spoiler reasons is drawing them in. And then we finally get Egwene's confession, where it's clear Valda's about to just skin Perrin alive, so she confesses, look, I can channel, and she does it, and she shoots an untrained fireball at him, and it just kind of goes, poof. That actually got a genuine laugh out of me, seeing her go like, rah! But then she frees Perrin, and Perrin's a big boy. He's a big man, and we see he has bright yellow eyes, and book fans around the world went, it's on, baby. And then they manage to escape, and in a nice character moment, Egwene actually snatches all these rings from Valda, and I just like that she did that. She's like, no, you do not get to keep these. I'm out. And we see the White Cloaks are being attacked by what seems at least like 1 or 2 packs of wolves. And I'm really hoping that means soon we're going to get another character introduced who's from the books, and that will show how all of this happened. That's what I'm hoping for. But that's the gist of what happens with Perrin and Egwene. It is a pretty much recreation with a slight twist of something that happened to them in the books. And most of all, for me as a viewer level, it was just a way for people to be able to act the crap out of their characters. I liked Egwene's stubborn refusals to bend to Valda. They felt a bit childish, which does make sense. She's a kid, essentially, at this point, standing up to Valda, and she's still just being a stubborn, like, yeah. And I like that. And we have Perrin just kind of going into spoilers. But let's cut on over to Rand and Mat. They have officially been separated from Tom, and it appears that he is not alive, at least from what the show is putting forth. And this whole plotline with them, though, essentially starts with Rand walking by this stone with a ton of carvings into it. And I will spend a lot of time on that when the season's over and I come back and do my spoiler book series-filled discussion of these episodes, because that was one of those things that made me go, and in a nice little slip in here, we also find out that they've been on the road for a month, which I was actually wondering that actively. How long have these people just been walking to Tar Valon? A full month. And I know a lot of people who have just started watching the show are very confused by the distances and locations. Here's a map. I'm kind of like on the same boat where I think they should at least show one somehow within the show. It's on the website, but it's not in the actual show, and I can see how that can be a bit confusing. I know why they avoided it for their intro segment, because then everyone would just go, oh, it's Game of Thrones intro, so they couldn't really do a map, even though for this kind of world, it's really needed. But yeah, here's a map, and, you know, Tar Valon, Emond's Field, that's where they're going. There's also something else mentioned here that I can't really bring focus to because I feel like it'll be a spoiler, but yes, I also caught that, people who read the books, and for people who haven't, and we also get our first viewings of Dragon Mountain Tar Valon, and once we are inside TV, it is a cultural melting pot, as it absolutely should. Tar Valon is essentially the center of a lot of people's travels within this world, and so it's just kind of bright and vibrant, and I really liked the vibe we're getting here, and Mat stood out by contrast so much because he's so clearly under some kind of corruption, and he's just like, leave me alone. No one touch me. That was not voice filters. I can just do that. You will all die. This is my domain. And we have this conversation between Rand and Mat where Mat is convinced he killed that family and little girls. And Rand's like, no, you didn't. I can't get into this because of spoiler reasons, I will say is I know the right answer to certain things like this. I just will not get into them because these videos are welcome to people who have not read the books, and I'm excited to talk about this in more detail, with my prediction being we will get an answer by the end of the next episode. I hope. I think that's being set up. We're going to see some cuts that go beyond cuts. And we also get a glimpse of Padan Fain. I counted 2. Fain is around. He is sneaking amongst Tar Valon, and with him having, you know, maybe been responsible for Winter's Night with that shot of him being like, hey, look at these motherfuckers being killed, putting down a cup and walking away. That can't be good news, can it? It's not, is it? No. And we meet Loyal! And I was harsh on the costuming of Loyal in Fantasy News, but I don't know if it's seeing it in motion or Hamed's performance, but I'm not minding it nearly as much as I thought I would. In fact, Hamed is damn charming. He is just Loyal. It's over the top, it's a bit corny, and it's naive as hell. And that's not naive, he's very wise, literal. And I love him just continuing to talk as people walk away and just not paying attention and just going about his little scholarly thought process. It felt so freaking Loyal. And I would bet Hamed listened to Michael Kramer's Loyal voice and pulled quite a bit from it, because that is his cadence to me. My biggest criticism would just be the hair. The hair is weird. But the face and his embodiment of the character is gosh dang outstanding. It's just a wholesome little bean and I want to give him a hug. Oh wait, I met that man. That's weird. Nah, I still want to give you a hug, bro. Sorry if that's weird. Now, earlier we saw because Loghain was gentled, he was let out of his cage, but here we see the Aes Sedai parading him through the streets, and he is back inst his cave, and Rand and Mat go to see his parade through the streets of the Aes Sedai being like, look, we caught the dragon, the false dragon, and I assume they put him back in the cage as like a form of humiliation or possibly protection because he's getting a lot of shit thrown at him. He's appearing mad. He actually looks directly at Rand and Mat and starts going like, ha 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 ha! I am on Percocet from my surgery, so if this is coming across weird, I do apologize. And then there is a pact made between Rand and Mat where they both say, hey, if I ever end up like that, please. And it hurts. It hurts. It hurts. Now, I'm not putting this forward because I think it's true or false. I am not trying to hint at anything towards the show. I am not spoiling nothing. But if you are new to the Wheel of Time and the show is your first introduction to this story and you know nothing more, please comment down below who you think in our party can channel, who you think is the Dragon Reborn, and what else is going on. No one's spoiling anything for them. I just want to know, if you haven't read the books and have had nothing spoiled for you, what is your current theories? And because of some setup that happens in the other plotline, we actually see Loyal has found Nynaeve, and because Rand described her to him, he brings in Nynaeve, and this does 2 effective things for the storyline. Yes, it reunites them, great. But it also shows us that these people are having a lot of conversations and time is passing off screen, which shows often forget to demonstrate, and that drives me nuts. Because we never saw Rand describe Nynaeve to Loyal, unless my brain completely farted out. I am on painkillers. And it's nice to have writing that shows like there's time passing. These people are engaging with each other. I like that. I know some people want to see every bit of information explicitly shown as it's delivered on screen, but to me that just grinds pacing to a halt. So for me, this is my preference. And then we have Mat as Nynaeve comes to him being like, hey, I can heal you. Just snap at her and be like, don't touch me. That's his little Bilbo moment. Like he had his Bilbo. Yeah, that's what Robert Jordan's basically doing here. And then there's a sit-down conversation between Rand and Nynaeve that gave me a lot of hope for the future of these 2 characters' chemistry. They are one of my favorite relationships as the series progresses, and that's as much detail as I will go in, and it just felt very right. They have a lot of mutual respect and understanding for one another, and it came through palpably here. But now let's go ahead and move on to the final storyline here before we get into the review, and that's going to be Lan, Nynaeve, Moiraine, and Loghain. I'm going to go ahead and say, here's the point where you can kind of see the last remnants of energy post-surgery leak from my body, so apologies if it seems a little lackluster from here on out. Love you though, thank you. So first we have an Aes Sedai funeral where it shows they're paying respects for the dead. One thing that, this is a very tiny nitpick, the grave was so shallow, like they dug graves for, you know, the dead, and one of them was like really shallow grave. I don't know about burying bodies.
It's the perfect cover, Daniel. Now no one will suspect you. Good job.
But to me, this was just like, that's gonna become apparent. Maybe they pile rocks on top. I don't know. But it seemed they were showing respect to all the dead, because I believe I saw they also buried the king that fought against them. That just kind of hit me as very Aes Sedai, and I enjoyed it. And then they get to the White Tower, and if we're doing the chronology of the episode, Nynaeve is the first one to arrive at the White Tower ahead of Mat and Rand. And as Moiraine takes Nynaeve to a room where she can stay in, we have Nynaeve kind of cutting through a lot of Moraine's BS, and I liked seeing her being smart enough to be like, okay, I get that you'll know when they come in the city. Will you actually tell me? And then Moiraine dodging again, and then she finally gives an answer that's like, hey, if I find your friends, I will let you know. But she never said how soon she'd let him know. She never said, like, immediately. There is also Nynaeve's arrogance that comes through in one way where she's like, maybe the tower shouldn't underestimate me. And it's like, yes, Nynaeve, this institution that's thousands of years old, filled with some of the most powerful, intelligent people in the entire world, should not underestimate you. We also have Steppen, whose Aes Sedai died in the last episode, very well developed and set up here as he is spending time with Lan, and he is just grieving. He has this ring ceremony where he takes his Aes Sedai's ring to a fire, and it's just a lot of build towards something I think a lot of people saw coming, but you were supposed to narratively. I think it's like having a clock ticking, and we'll get more into that in a second. But there's this beautiful moment where Steppen comes to Nynaeve and asks her for something to help him sleep, and he says, you know, he doesn't want to forget the pain, and Nynaeve says, like, don't worry, you never will forget. And if you're paying attention to the scene, he essentially is telling Nynaeve he's not actually going to use this stuff, which on rewatch was like, oh no, that's bad, that's so bad. We get some more Liandrin trying to manipulate Nynaeve moments, and Nynaeve just being like, okay, just whatever. If she does not like Moiraine, Nynaeve actively hates Liandrin, and it's really funny to me. I don't know why. I think it's because Liandrin's performance is really strong in being like a hateable character. Like when she says persimmons and then does like that with her eyes, I was like, I want to punch you right in your little mouth. Not the actress, I'm sure you're a lovely person, but it was just like such a good hateable performance. I was like, I want to slap you. I just want to do what the White Cloaks did to the Tinkers and go slap, slap, slap. And then we get a scene with Alana and Moiraine in Moraine's rooms, and there's like a little, was there like a flirt vibe here, or is that just me? It's probably just me. I want everyone on this show to kiss, so just moving on. But in my biggest criticism of this entire episode, Moiraine puts her fucking boots on the bed. Were you raised in a barn? You don't put your shoes on a bed. I don't care if it's your own bed. If you do that, you're nasty. I think that is absolutely repugnant. This scene kind of establishes like what Moraine's position in the tower really is. She has powerful enemies here, and she's been absent for a long time. So she's not super aware of the nuance of all the dynamics here, and that could be a major part of her downfall in these next couple episodes if she's not careful. We also have special attention brought to some kind of magical item within Moraine's room, and I'm not sure what this is going to do, but it's definitely interesting. And then we get Lan and Steppen's final bonding, where they're talking about how Steppen is probably going to bond with Alana and try and, you know, get along with those warders. And there's this sense of dread hanging over the scene, especially on a rewatch. You can really clearly see what Steppen's actually doing. There's also a very nice mention of the Forsaken, and stay tuned on the channel for a video about who the Forsaken are, what they are, as well as the different Ajas. He slips Lan the tea, which makes him go to sleep because obviously Steppen didn't want to sleep. He says he doesn't like to because he wants to remember his Aes Sedai through the pain. As Lan passes out, he goes off and he kills himself. Lan wakes up in the morning and realizes what's happened and sprints to find Steppen. And I don't want to get too personal, but I am someone who has had a friend do a similar thing, and I was there when they were found, and it is the worst day of my life. By a lot. Like, still nightmares every now and then. Horrible, horrible, horrible experience. So watching this scene, I think they got Lan's emotions pretty freaking spot on. When you first find someone like that, I think the number one thing you feel is like a failure, like as a friend, as someone who's like responsible, connected with them, you feel like you should have done more, you haven't done enough, and the look of defeat on Daniel Henney's face was very powerful. It looked to me like someone who was trying to push down a lot of emotion and failing. And I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into it. Maybe I'm projecting my own experiences, but that's what came across to me. very powerfully. We then get Stepin's funeral, where everyone is dressed in white yet again, and Lan is leading this ceremony where they all seem to be beating their chests, and we get an amazing usage of the Aes Sedai bond to show just how much pain Lan is in, where Moraine's feeling Lan's pain through the bond, and she's already crying just from feeling what he's going through. And then Lan looking up at her and seeing his own pain reflected back on him breaks down. Okay, yeah, that's hitting a nerve. I get a lot of people are probably not going to be very happy seeing Lan break down, because in the books he's the most stoic character ever. But for me, Daniel Henney has managed to capture that stoicism in a way where he's earned having emotional moments like this. It maybe would have been a bit more powerful for him as a character if it was a little further on in the story, where we got more stoic Lan before seeing him break. But I think my own personal connection to something like this just made it seem very human, and that's something I think more people need to remember about Lan. He's still a human being. Like, yes, he's very stone cold, but everyone has a breaking point, and this seemed like an earned breaking point. I mean, he feels the responsibility of he was watching over this guy, and yeah, he was drugged, but your brain's not going to logically be like, I was drugged, it's not my fault. Like, you're gonna blame yourself, and that... ouch. So getting into the review, my biggest praise of this episode was a lot of the performances and the writing. I really enjoyed how grief was handled, how depression came across, because you can often see people who are kind of seeming like they're going to recover before they end up not forever permanently, if you know what I mean. And it was just, I don't know, that's how those situations, in my experience anyway, go down. It's not the most action-packed episode, but boy, did it clip by. I did not realize a full hour had gone by while I was watching it. Wow. And with how charming Loyal is, which was my biggest fear going into this episode, I'm actually just happy overall. Well, it's not the most fun episode. I think it's rock solid. And this one's going to be an 8 for me. I really liked the way this episode came across, and that's super impressive, with the most action-packed thing being a bunch of tinkers getting pimps slapped, followed up by some mild torture. So yeah, sorry if this got a bit dark, everybody. Anyway, let me know what you think of this episode of The Wheel of Time in the comments down below. Like and subscribe if you have not already, and hit the Patreon if you want to support what I do here. Have a good one, y'all. Peace.